Episode 100. Thank you guys so much, everyone, for being here for this very special edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. I cannot believe that we're already to episode 100. You guys who have become a part of this small knit community, it has meant a ton to me, especially the messages that I get thanking me for the different guests and the conversations and the things you guys learn. I just want to say I am learning a ton as well. And it has been a great honor to sit here on this side of the microphone and screen to interview people and hear why they are who they are and what they do. You know, when I reach out to all of my guests, it's usually on Instagram. Something will pique my interest, whether it just comes across my feed or I see someone posting about someone else in the Instagram world. And when I reach out, what I typically do is say, hey, my name is Seth. I have a podcast called the Stupid Questions Podcast where I have people on to hear who they are and why they are who they are and what they do. And I usually do a little name drop to what's relevant to them. So hopefully that will be incentive to say yes, which is a little strategy there. And then usually they say yes and I schedule and book it. And after that, for 95%, if probably more like 98% of the podcasts that I've recorded, only I think 2 or 3 people have requested to have the questions reviewed ahead of time. And even then, I only kind of give the overarching broad ones that I typically ask, which kind of goes, as you guys know, in the chronological order of family, high school, college, just trying to get them up to modern day with the hope of just drawing some context before we dive into the more deeper philosophical sides of who they are and why they do what they do. And those questions that I ask to people in the moment, I oftentimes will kind of make those up other than kind of the core ones, because I think it helps me to learn how to listen better. And it also helps me to, I think, create a better story arc for the person. And when people want to talk, like start to share something and I come up with a question for what they were sharing, I usually try to dive into the things that I can tell and realize that bring interest to them. And when people open up what they want to talk about, it's always much better than forcing someone to try to talk about whatever it is that I want them to talk about. So I've learned a ton, and thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much for submitting the questions. Thank you for your notes. And without further ado, we're just going to jump into it because I've already recorded this intro probably close to 6 or 7 times. And I need to be true to you guys and myself and not try to make this picture perfect. So we're just going to jump into the first question after I have a little sip of my tea here. All right. So, who is Seth? This is actually a hard question for me to answer because I think it's just a hard question in general. I am 32 years old, grew up in North Carolina mostly, some in Tennessee and Kentucky. I am a complicated, emotional, but very logical at times. Tendency to lean toward OCD, type A, but very loving and passionate human being who has the desire to give a platform to others for them to share their stories. And even before I started this podcast, I really think that what I'm saying now is something that has obviously evolved over time. But even before starting the podcast, one thing I did, especially in college, was meet with people who I thought were interesting and just ask them questions about who they were, why they do what they do, and what their thoughts and aspirations were for life. In college, I started a company called Sway Insulated Hammocks, and it is exactly what it sounds like. During the hammock craze, where a lot of people, depending on where you went to college, you probably saw these different like nylon parachute hammocks that were strewn across college campuses in the U.S. probably during the years of, 2010 to 2000, really even 20. And one time I went camping with some friends and I wanted to take like my hammock that I recently got, which was an Eagle Nest Outfitters hammock, and I was going to sleep in it. So I took my sleeping bag, all the things you would typically go camping in, and I hung up my hammock on this little island in the middle of the Ocoee, which is a lake, a river actually in Tennessee that flows down. I think it connects with the Tennessee River, maybe not. But anyway, on the lake, we stayed on a little island and I hung up my hammock And as you guys know who are maybe more familiar with the outdoors, whenever you're near water, it makes it a bit cooler. And so when we hung up our hammocks, and I took my sleeping bag, I threw it in the hammock, went to sleep, and after a couple hours, I kind of realized like, wow, like I have this problem called CBS that I've now coined, cold butt syndrome. When my sleeping bag insulation compressed underneath me in the weight of the hammock, where it's like holding, and I have those kind of points where I'm more my weight is sitting. The insulation integrity is not very good, and with the air running under the hammock and off the water, it was a bit cooler. And so, similar to how the bridge rises before the road, that whole effect, I started realizing like, man, this is really chilly. So, I had this idea like, what if you could insulate hammocks? And right to that point, in my college career. That was my freshman year. I ended up deciding to go um, overseas for a year during my college year as a sophomore to go be a quote unquote student missionary. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Seventh day Adventist Christian. I grew up in that church, and we have a university located in Chattanooga, Tennessee, more specifically, Collegedale, Tennessee. And this university has a program called Student Missions, or what's the other one? ACA, Adventist Colleges Abroad, where you can either choose to go study abroad for a year or you can go be a student missionary. And the idea behind being a student missionary was there was organizations scattered throughout the world who needed basically volunteers, and I signed up for the Philippines. And when I went to the Philippines, this was a point in my life where, like, as you guys know, when I was 16, I lost my father to suicide, and that obviously radically changed the way that I view a lot of things. It sent me down sent me on a downward spiral, for lack of a better term and phraseology, for a number of years, as I was trying to figure out who I was and why I was the way I was. Specifically in high school, I had several mental breakdowns. The principal of my high school at the time told my mom that I should probably be submitted to a mental institution, which honestly, he wasn't wrong. But really, what it came down to is I just didn't understand what was going on. I was diving into trying to find a sense of power in witchcraft. I was trying to find a sense of power in video games, which who doesn't like a good video game? But specifically for me, it was the only thing I felt like I could control looking back on it. I dove into the messing around with girls stage, went trying to date just the prettiest girl I could find, and then turned out not to be the best girl of the high school in terms of just moral values. And then I tried to, date the best girl in the school and did convince her to date me. But she, it didn't end up working out. And so I'm bringing all this story full arc here. So bear with me. And after the end of high school, when I was about to go to college, I just kind of was only focused on the girl thing. It was the only thing that for me at that time seemed like it could bring any fulfillment. Ever since a very young age, I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a family. That's just who I was, probably because my mother and father, like, we didn't have a lot of really close, intimate times together with my siblings, my younger sisters. There was a lot of struggle there because a lot of it had to do with my father's depression and my mother being a bit more, honestly, like me, type A, very driven. It created a lot of clash. So going back to high school and wrapping up that year, the girl who I was dating, who was the good girl, she ended up breaking up with me right as she went to college, just a few months before me. And then I got there. And again, I just kind of chased her for months and months at a time. And when I finally gave that up, when I came to a place where I realized, like, okay, we're not going to get together. It's actually really funny. I'll go ahead and just say this story as well, by the way, because I find it to be interesting. But her father was a construction. What am I saying? He was a business owner, and they made fine custom homes. And I worked for him for 2 summers. And that's that first summer I was working for him while we were dating. I really saw it in my mind, like, well, he didn't have any sons. He had 3 daughters. I liked his eldest daughter. And I was in my mind thinking, well, I'm going to go to school to get construction management degree. I am going to marry this woman and I'm going to take over his business. And, the rest is history. There's my path to success. That obviously did not happen for more reasons than one. And it was good that it didn't happen. I wasn't in a place that I was anywhere near ready for marriage. So it just goes to show it's really interesting, how our minds, at least my mind, I will often times or have oftentimes created these false realities and these false narratives in my mind that I want to follow and dream for. And then I realize that I will bend what's actually happening, bend the fabric of reality to afford this dream or this vision to come true. And that's been something, a hard lesson I've had to learn throughout my life. So going back to college, once I finally started to give up this idea that the only thing that could make me happy was a woman, I had this resurgence in my life, what many people would call a come to Jesus moment, where I realized in my in that freshman year and going into my sophomore year, so it was the third year that I went overseas. Actually, would have been my junior year, I believe. I realized that I can't do this on my own. I need something more that's real. Like I said, I dabbled in witchcraft. I dabbled in drugs, getting high. I didn't really drink. I drank once, got drunk once, and it was honestly not that great of an experience at all. So I didn't have any propensity to try that again. And in college, when I made that decision, I didn't know how I was going to work out financially. But what I would consider a miracle happened where as I started getting involved in this program that was supposed to send out the missionaries in the summer, in the end of March, going into April, school would be ending in May. I joined at the last minute to kind of join this batch of kids that were going to go out to be student missionaries the next year. And it didn't look like it was going to work out because I didn't come from money. I was more or less trying to pay my way through school through self-funded and then being self-funded and also through student loans. And in order to go, I needed to basically pay off my last semester and raise a bunch of money to go to the Philippines. That was partially assisted by the university, but not a lot. I forget how much I had to raise, but it was several thousands of dollars, probably close to 10. Excuse me. And I knew that I needed to find a job. I needed a place to live that summer. I needed to raise that money. Excuse me. And the miracle that happened was I had a place to stay for free at the time. The gymnastics coach, I was on this acrobatic team called the Gym Masters. I was able to stay at the coach's house in one of his spare rooms. And I got a job building a house that was literally just across the street. Now, I didn't have a car at this point. My minivan of old that my mom let me use basically blew up. And so I had a place to stay. And then I had a place to work. And then someone paid off anonymously my entire school bill for that remainder of the year and paid for all of the money for me to go be a student missionary that year. So that was like the first real thing in my life that I realized, like, okay, well, this is important for me to go and do this. And so I decided I was going to give my life to God, but I really had this thought and feeling that I'm going to go and be a light in a dark area and I'm going to, go be a missionary. I'm going to save these people from their sins or whatever it is. Like just a very young understanding of what it means to be a missionary or a disciple or any of that things in a religious context. And I'll wrap the story up shortly because we have a lot of other questions to go into. But I got to the Philippines the day before, actually, I got drunk for the first time. I get on that plane. I was like, okay, well, this is it. I'm going over, flying over to northern Luzon, this northern island on the northern coast of the Philippines. And when I got there, I quickly realized that a lot of my addictions, a lot of my problems, they followed me halfway across the world, and I'm still going to have to face them. And it all came to a head. I think the biggest thing for me was pornography that I was like strongly addicted to, and we didn't have really good internet there, but we'd have to have internet down at one of these houses that one of the leaders of the mission lived at. And without giving just too much detail, like I would sneak over and go over there so that I could basically hook up to these porn sites and, do what I wanted to do. And just chase that lust machine. And it all came to a head for me during a typhoon, actually, that came and hit the northern island. In the mission where we were, it was under construction. We lived in like this little compound fenced in area where we had housing at the top of one of these like buildings where most people would hang out. There was a church right next door. And then on the other side of the church, across the courtyard, there was this clinic that we were building. And it was very raw, rebar everywhere, pieces of wood, concrete, unfinished flooring, just a lot of stuff. And during this typhoon, it's quite dangerous. Power's out, wind is howling. I'll try to find some videos of this place whenever the typhoon was coming through. It was absolutely insane. And I had an urge, and I wanted to go and watch some porn. I wanted to, chase that desire. And so I went over to this construction site in the middle of a freaking typhoon with no power, no anything. I laid on my back, did my thing, watched porn in the middle of this storm. And once I did that, and came to the end of that just experience without being too graphic, like I'm laying on my back, obviously disgusting, in a disgusting place, in a dangerous place. And I realized like how at the bottom of the barrel I had allowed myself to go. And I remember thinking, if I continue to follow this path, it's going to kill me. It's going to kill the relationships around me. It's going to destroy my life. And so at that moment, like I decided, I think it was a lot of the small seeds that have been planted in my life from people who cared about me and who loved God in the past, that I realized like, I got to make a change because this isn't good. And so that started me on the trajectory of moving forward through life and really, truly figuring out who is Seth. So that's a long-winded version of a little bit of my story. And there's obviously a lot more that I'll probably share through these questions, but that is the question, who is Seth? So the next question is, what was your upbringing like? What sports did you play as a kid? What was your dream job growing up? Thank you, Colleen. I remember this one from Instagram. So what was upbringing like? My upbringing, really until I was 16, I wouldn't have said it was that much different than other people. But now looking back, it was obviously very different. My dad struggled with depression. He was a great artist. In fact, I've got a bunch of stuff in the closet that I'm going to be putting up on the wall in the future from my father because he was a painter. He was also a music artist, and he was just a very eclectic individual. He went back to school in his 30s to become a nurse to provide for our family. And so I have a lot of influence from him. He was probably amongst all the things that he did artistry wise, he was the best at being a drummer. He was a very good drummer. I remember growing up watching lots of videos and VHS of like Neil Peart and these other famous drummers like Phil Collins, and just learning some of their techniques. So I do love drums, and I do plan to get a drum set. But anyway, that was my dad's side. And then my mom, she grew up in a very Italian, loud home, lots of food and family, but also lots of just craziness. We have the mafia in our blood going back about 2 generations. My great-great-grandfather, I think is who it was. Latella was the name, not Nutella, Latella. We broke off relations with that family, I'm told, because he ended up throwing my great-grandmother down the stairs while she was pregnant. And so at that point, divorce followed suit. And so the family started to become kind of broken up. But my upbringing was influenced by a lot of these things. And I would say that my upbringing was probably 75% of the time I was with my mom and my mom's friends and their daughters, it seemed like. So I always have found it very easy to connect with women, probably more so. As I've gotten older, definitely enjoy connecting with men just as much, especially older men. And just because of the wisdom aspect there. So that influenced a lot of what we did. My mother was very driven, always taking us to the extracurricular activities after school. We were always busy. And I think that was in part a reason that she did that, was to kind of more or less keep us away from the fact, or not to notice the fact that my father was constantly struggling with depression. So my father, like I said, he did take his life when I was 16. And I can tell that story. But he tried to do so many times. And I have several different memories when I was younger of that experience happening. I guess I'll just go ahead and tell the story because it's appropriate now. So, the first time that I remember this becoming like a true reality was I don't remember how old I was. I was probably around the age of, no, I was 13. I just had my 13th birthday. And I remember my mom's friend coming over to our home, our little double wide mobile home in North Carolina. I remember my mom crying. I remember her crying and my mom having to go somewhere to try to find my dad. Cause I just remember like this foggy memory of my mom being on the phone and my mom saying like, Chuck, where are you? What ended up happening was my father decided he was going to take his life. He drove his car somewhere, bought some piping, parked it behind some building. And he was going to pipe in the carbon monoxide into his car. And he was telling my mom goodbye. And, you know, for whatever the reason was at that time, like that he was just like, this was the end. So my mom tried to find him. They ended up tracing his phone number or something like that. And they, meaning the authorities, found him, took him to the hospital, gave him a bunch of tests. He woke up and he was completely fine. So there was like this crazy miracle because he was in that car for well over 25, 30 minutes, passed out, should have been dead. And he gave this amazing testimony up at church where he, told this story and how God had like literally saved him, and he did not die. There was no poisoning in his blood, no poisoning in his lungs, or there was no after effects of this other than him just kind of passing out there in the moment. And he was really fortunate for that. And so, excuse me. And so that was at my 13th birthday. I remember going to take out the trash, and my dad was walking up the hill with me. I think it was on a Saturday, and he was asking me, like, did you hear what I talked about in church today? And the 13-year-old brain is not fully functioning enough, I think, to have these really deep conversations. Maybe somewhere, but mine, like, I knew what he was asking, but I didn't know how to process and to have a conversation on that. So I was like, yeah, I heard it. So it's probably a little frustrating or hurtful to him, I would imagine, just because he wanted me to connect with him and I didn't have that ability or the desire at that time. So like that happened a lot growing up. I was told, I can't remember how many times he tried to take his life, but he did do that. So I think that my mom was really trying to shield us from that in the best way that she knew possible. And then obviously, the story is from 16-year-old, like when I lost my father, was this. I woke up one morning. It would have been October 16, 2008. So the world, I guess, was already going in shambles from the financial crisis. Who knows how that relates? But I woke up one morning and I was just very upset. My mom was trying to get me out of bed. I think most 16-year-olds, this isn't a super uncommon trait, but I did not want to get up that morning. And me and my mom, being very similar, we fought tooth and nail, and I was arguing with her about something stupid. Don't even remember what it was, but I can guarantee it was ridiculous. And she was trying to calm me down, tell me to like basically pipe down because my father, who was working night shifts at the time, had just gotten home a few hours before or a couple hours before, and he was trying to sleep. Anyway, we were fighting in the kitchen. I saw my dad come out of his bedroom, standing behind my mom. And whatever we were fighting about, I had it in my mind that my father really should be agreeing with me. And I saw him come out of his room, like I said, and I was hoping that he was going to back me up, essentially. Well, he didn't, as he shouldn't have. And he basically condemned my behavior, as he should have. And usually I would go give my father like a hug and a kiss every morning before I left and just say, like, see you later, love you. Because that was the interactions with him with his work schedule were typically pretty short for several days of the week. So it was either late at night or early in the morning. One thing that I used to do actually a lot that was quite fun memory is tell him, in the morning, give a hug and kiss. Hey, when you come home, will you come rub my back for a few minutes, or give me a hug and kiss when you get home? Oftentimes I wouldn't remember it, but a few times I did when he'd come in the room and give me a hug and kiss and like maybe rub my back for a few minutes. And those were some really sweet memories I have of my father. So that morning, though, because we were angry and fighting with each other, I told myself, well, I'm not going to say goodbye to him. So I left out the front door, slammed the door, went and sat in the car, slammed the door, and waited for mom to take us up to school. So we went off to school, get back in the car after 3 p.m. or whatever, and my mom, that obviously our tempers have simmered down, and there was probably some apology that happened, But I just remember after the apology, my mom was like, well, let's go get your dad's favorite pizza, and before he goes to work, or if he's working the next day, I can't remember if he was going to, but let's get the pizza and we'll go home and we'll eat it with him. And I was planning like, well, I should probably apologize. Well, we got the pizza on our way home. And I remember I think it was 2 extra larges, Papa John's pizzas, cheese, and the tomatoes. And this is back in the day when they sliced the Roma tomatoes. And I think we had spinach and mushroom and a few other things. It was really good. Pizza. We get out of the car, and the way that our minivan was parked next to the house was they had this ramp built because whoever lived there before was in a wheelchair. So there's this long wooden ramp that we always kind of parked beside. And then I got out, walked around, following my mom and my sisters up this ramp, and then the front door of the house was closed, and there's a glass door. My mom opened the glass door. There's a note, a little sticky note, yellow sticky note, I believe, on the front door. And I didn't read it at the time, but the note said, Tammy, don't let the kids in the house. So my mom put everything on top of the hot tub that we had. So funny. We had a mobile home, double wide, and then we have this really nice hot tub. So funny. Anyway, she put our stuff on the hot tub. She looked shocked. She went and slept inside the house, locked the door behind her. And as a mobile home, you can hear pretty much everything that's going on inside. So she's walking through one end of the house, going toward the kids' bedrooms, and then she's walking back toward the other end of the house where her bedroom is, and all I hear are doors opening and closing. And the last door she opened was in her closet. And I remember hearing her just scream a scream that I've never heard anyone scream before. One of agony, sadness, fear, and I remember her steps coming back, hastened, quick and loud toward the front door. She opened the door and she looked straight at me, not at my sisters first, from what I remember. And she just said, like, he's gone. And if you ever see someone in hysteria, and just like, it's different than a level of sadness. It's when you lose someone. I saw that and it scared me to death. Because my father, you guys asked like, what was my upbringing like? My father, in the later years of his life, he was 39 when he took his life. He said a lot of things to me that at the time I didn't pick up on, but like, Seth, when I'm gone, make sure you like check the roof for leaks, or Seth, when I'm gone, you're going to have to take care of the oil. And I was thinking like, okay, when you're like way gone, sure. Like, you do this stuff now. So whatever. Yeah. I guess after you die, like, I can help with that stuff. But I never thought about it in the context of now, even in the now being 16, even though I knew 3 years earlier that he'd like tried to take his life in that way. So things started to make sense. But I remember my mom looking at me with those eyes when she opened the door, and I was so shocked. But I remember making a distinct decision of, how am I going to act? Am I going to just be calm and kind of shut down, or am I going to just explode? And I remember I chose explode, and I ripped off a spindle off of the side of this porch. I beat the wind chimes to death. I beat the side of the hot tub. I beat whatever was around me. I just went berserk, and then I just stopped. And as I was beating things around, just trying to destroy something, trying to get out that frustration, that sadness, whatever it was, I remember inside like having this conversation, like, I should really stop doing this. I really should stop doing this. And it was a calm voice. And I, call it the Holy Spirit, call it your conscience, call it whatever. I've always been very aware of that internal battle going on inside. It's so funny. We come to these ages of reasoning. When I was very young, I remember watching Star Wars with my father, and I all of a sudden had this just epiphany moment where I jumped up and I said, Dad, in all the movies, in all of the storybooks, there's always a good side and there's always a bad side. There's always dark and light. And obviously we all know that and recognize that because that's our lived experience. There's good and evil. But for me, it like really hit me over the head. So I've always kind of had this from a very young age. That probably happened when I was 8 or 9. I've had like just this keen awareness, probably had to do with my evangelical upbringing. Anyway, so that's how I lost my father. We went and called a bunch of friends. I called the girl who I loved literally forever, even though she didn't like me. And she was the first person I called. again, going back to, the great sense of comfort that I always would get from or wanted was from the female. Like I wanted that relationship with someone so bad to a point of like where it's a little crazy, like very crazy. I kept pictures of this one girl I had a crush on forever, like next to my bed. It was just really, really strange looking back on it. And I don't know why my mom didn't stop me, but hey, that was me. But anyway, so that's the story that like really, I think, defined a lot of my childhood. And then high school and college came out. So, what sports did I play as a kid though? I loved playing soccer. Even though I was bad at it, freshman in high school, I joined the JV team. I had bad asthma, and I remember running the mile and trying to keep up with dudes and like having an asthma attack in the middle of August in North Carolina heat. But it was a lot of soccer. I did not supercross, motocross and hare scramble racing. My dad did buy me a dirt bike for the first time when I was 7, had a little Yamaha PW50. And then I got a PW80 and then a TTR 125. So if you don't know about motorcycles, all of those are like kind of the smaller versions of the actual 50, 85, and 125s. But I was a smaller dude and still am. 5'5.5" and I think soaking wet nowadays in the middle of this Ironman 70.3 block up with like 123. So got to gain a little weight. So let's move on to some more questions because I'm taking too long. Have you ever not released an episode? Yes, there is one episode that I have not released. That episode was with a friend named Jeff, good guy. And I think that he was just uncomfortable with some of the topics. Excuse me 1 second, I have to cough. And, yeah, that's the only time I haven't released an episode. And it was a really good one. We talked a lot about, just his life, his upbringing, his personal journey. He's a great entrepreneur, and he had some experiences with psychedelics that I really wanted to document and talk about, because you guys have heard me talk about those stuff before and kind of my thoughts on it, but I wanted to hear someone else's perspective. So that is the only one I haven't released. Have you ever had difficult guest? The one with Jackie Herring comes to mind, but it turned out to be so good for the exact same reason. Her discomfort talking about her faith was difficult. Yeah, so that's a good question. I've had several difficult guests, and for different reasons. Sometimes it is because they don't want to open up, which is okay. I think that it's a big ask to jump into a podcast with someone and hear them. To ask someone to jump into a podcast and to just open up in such a deep way. It's not easy to get people to open up. I will say that. But on the same token, if they truly feel heard, then it's a lot easier. So yeah, I'm trying to think of like a specific other difficult one. I don't want to call out names, but and there's nothing against these people for this reason. But when I interview younger people, it typically is a little bit harder, not because they're not good guests, but I think just that where they are in life and the lacking of experience and sometimes the self-awareness that they have developed to that point, it can be more difficult to get to the root things of people. And then you have other people that I've talked to where they're not comfortable going deep. And literally 99% of the time, except for the round 2 interviews, these are people I'm meeting for literally the first time. So that makes sense to me. But the younger people are usually a little harder for me because I like connecting with the older people because I feel like I'm an old soul in a lot of ways, just because of the life experiences I've had. And yeah, that's that. Yeah. So hope that answers that question. Who is your dream guest? I don't really have a dream guest, if I'm being honest. I feel like I could interview anyone and be pretty chill about it. Don't get me wrong. Like I do get a little nervous about different people coming on just for different kinds of reasons, knowing who they are. Or, for example, I just recently interviewed, that you'll hear this interview pretty soon, with Morgan Pearson. And as I was doing a little bit of research to ask questions, I realized that he lost his brother just like 3.5 years ago. So I knew that would be, a difficult conversation. He's in a point right now going through, when I remember after I lost my dad when I was 16, like when I was 19, I was still struggling super hard with it. And he lost his brother tragically and suddenly. So I knew that would be a hard conversation and that have to be really delicate. So in that way, I was a little bit nervous. But as far as a dream guest, I really don't think I have one. What is my pet peeve on podcast guest behavior? I don't know if I have really pet peeves. I think if someone's interviewing me, I do have a really big pet peeve, or if they ask me a question, but they're totally disengaged. I've had a few conversations with people where they ask me a question, but like they're multitasking or somewhere else. And I think that's just, it really disconnects. Like I really try to maintain somewhat of eye contact on here, and to show that I am engaged in the conversation. So when people disengage, that makes it very hard for me. But I've had a few instances myself where I've had to be more disciplined about this. When I'm talking to someone, I ask a question, they start talking, and sometimes, for 3 or 4 minutes, and then my brain, all of a sudden, I'm thinking about something way over here, and in my mind, I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to circle in. And I've come back to the conversation and realized, and it probably shows in some of the episodes where like I ask a question that's totally irrelevant, or it shows I wasn't listening. So that's a pet peeve of mine, on receiving and giving, if that makes sense. So next question, you mentioned one time that you were expecting to monetize, that you were expecting to monetize from the pod for a few years' time, or I think they meant weren't. How do you stay financially in the green during this time? You have expenses in daily life plus the pod expenses, triathlon training, racing, which is sadly not cheap. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't expect to monetize this for at least 3 years. I have no aims of monetizing it. However, I am working on a product right now, that's a little bike bag that I'm going to use under the old Sway name, making the insulated hammock days. And I may try to like sell something, because it's something that I see like a need for. But in terms of actual monetization of the podcast, I don't look to do that for at least 3 years' time, because it takes time to build an audience. There's probably 500 to 1,000 or so people who are like very consistently listening to the podcast, which is not huge. And I'm fine sharing those numbers because I take a lot of inspiration from people like Joe Rogan and Chris Williamson and Lex Friedman and Eric Weinstein talking about their early days. And they did it for years and never really let the data dictate how they operated. And I want to be the same way. I've talked with people like Kyle Glass from Pro Tri News, and they get many thousands, I'll just say, because I don't know if he wants me sharing, but many thousands of downloads per episode. And it took him a number of years to get there. And so, yeah, I have no rush. The cost for me right now with the podcast, because I have my own place, before it was about $70 to $80 an episode. Now, honestly, it's like $30 to $40 an episode. And it's not that much. It does take time. So if you count the time cost and stuff, that's fine. But I do consulting on the side that pays for my life, and, help run a small team in the real estate business. And then I do some coaching on the side. So that's how I kind of stay in the green. And now my wife is starting this job here now that we're in Redding, California, as a fellowship, or a fellow, I guess, with this nurse practitioner program. So that's how we're staying in the green, and we're doing good. God is blessed. We do have expenses, but we try to stay as frugal as possible. And all this furniture that literally, like this chair and stuff that I'm sitting on this desk, in the chair, and a lot of our furniture, it's all that my in-laws gave us, my wife's parents. So yeah, I think we're going to be okay. What would you, excuse me, I went too far. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is this pod a stepping stone or something else in making you, or making that grow is currently the goal? I don't really have a huge goal. I just want to be consistent. I have started a lot of little startups over the past. I've obviously had the hammock company. During the pandemic, I had a PPE, or personal protective equipment company, where I sold a lot of PPE to dental offices in the West and small doctor's offices and small hospitals, that kind of sprang up out of nowhere. And, that made a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot. It didn't make a ton of money, but it made a good bit of money, that more than I'd ever made before in a short amount of time. And those businesses that grow really fast typically don't stay around super long. If there's one thing I've learned from, all this startup entrepreneur world, where it's like, go out, raise VC funding, prove that you're worth $1 million, then prove you're worth $1 billion, and, burn cash for 7 years. And then, you sell it and somebody else makes it profitable, whatever. I don't really jive with that as much anymore. I think it can be done, and there are unicorns out there for sure. But when it comes to building a business, I want to build it like an oak tree. I want to give it time to mature and grow slowly, and build a solid foundation. Because when you build a house as fast as you can, and I've seen people do this because I've been a part of it, foundation isn't the greatest. There's gaps in the walls. There's stuff missing. Things start to crack. And once the foundation starts to settle, you see all of the issues. So I am all about taking my time. As far as where I see myself in 5 years, I'll probably still be doing the podcast. Hopefully have a kid or two. and, just enjoying life. I know a bunch of people who've made lots of money. Like you guys know, the very first a few episodes was with Mike Parnell. He co-founded Oakley Sunglasses, worked with Red Digital Camera or digital cinema cameras, and um, he basically told me without telling me that no matter how much money you have, it all becomes just like your new level of normal, and the things that really are valuable are your time. And so for me, like having the ability to make my own schedule is what I value above all else, because that allows me to value my family above all else, and value the things that I enjoy above all else. I love working. Don't get me wrong. I love working. I will work sometimes extra at night or in the morning or whenever, because I enjoy it. I enjoy process and building and doing consulting and helping people see their potential in a business context. So where do I see myself in 5 years? I don't know. I've met a lot of cool people. I've had a lot of really amazing mentors. I had this one crazy mentor. His name is Fred, near billionaire. Probably not. He's in the hundreds of millions, but he just died recently of more or less like a brain tumor situation, and he had to have brain surgery. And during that kind of downhill trend, he met with me as often as I wanted, like every other week there for a while, and sometimes even every week for a month or so, and just to kind of invest back in me. And I don't know why he did that per se. I didn't feel like I had much to offer him, but if for nothing else, like I realized that time is the most valuable thing. So I've met the cool people, I've met famous people, and it's not all it's cracked up to be. They're just humans trying to figure out their way in life. Don't get me wrong, you can do a lot with money, but you can do a lot more with time. So what would you consider be a dream come true for your podcast that could happen in the future? So a lot of people think that Stupid Questions is only focused on triathlon. And while that is my current outset of interests, and music is obviously some of them too. That's why I've had Nick on a couple of times. And, business. That's why I try to get a lot of these businesses in here that are in the triathlon space. That's just because it's easy to tap into them now because of my guest list in the past. But as I start to branch out, I think it's a dream come true to talk to more people. Like I'd love to talk to people who have very deep philosophical conversations, such as Jordan Peterson, I'm sure we've heard of. Eric Weinstein, would love to have a conversation with him. High functioning in terms of like verbal communication, mathematicians and scientists and doctors and people who are hyper specialized in different fields. I would love to have those types of conversations, similar to Joe Rogan. Just because it bring the most fulfillment I get out of life outside of my relationship with God and my relationship with my wife is the deep friendship conversations that I have with people. And so, the dream come true with this is that I could do it full time, and in that it could be my only source of income. But I'm very entrepreneurial, and I don't know if that'll ever happen because I always like starting new things. So we'll see. But the dream come true, I think, would be to have it be the sole source of my income, and I can talk to anybody who I want to. So next question is, what are your triathlon aspirations, and what would you define as your triathlon goal? That's changed over time. I've thought a lot about triathlon. When I first started, it was to be a professional. And that's still kind of like a stated goal to get my elite license. But I just recently talked to, oh man, who was it? It was a very recent guest. When I asked, oh no, it was Sky Munch. She was saying, and that's going to drop soon. She was saying that she considers a professional someone who can make money in the sport. So, I mean, if I can get my elite license and then make money through the podcast, I guess from her definition that I would be a professional. But I just want to keep getting better. I talked to Morgan Pearson recently, and he said the same thing, where his shift has been, get to the Olympics, get a medal. And he lived in that insatiable desire to fuel motivation. But he's realized that, just getting better is what truly matters. And now at 32 years of age, I'm very much in a similar mindset. I'm coaching myself right now, and I really enjoy it. And not because I don't need a coach, but because the pressure is on me from me, so I can throttle that. And, me having coaches in the past has been an interesting dynamic because of the loss of my father. I have very interesting relationships when it comes to men and how I relate to them in a mentorship way. Sometimes I get a little too, I just kind of lose myself a little bit, or I lose the adult Seth a little bit because the younger Seth is still trying to like lean on them for decision making and things like that. So it gets a little messy. So my aspirations, as I like, what I define as my goal is just to get better each day and enjoy it. I do want to do another full. I'd like to go to Nice. I would love to go to Kona, but it's on Saturday, and I don't race on Saturdays, so that's part of the sadness there. But that's why I'm going to the 70.3 World Champs here in Worlds in New Zealand, because it's on Sunday. So that's the goals. Have you seen a big improvement on your triathlon performance with having a coach? Yeah. I mean, I've seen performance kind of nonstop, improvement, sorry, nonstop. I've had a few down races, but I seem to be getting better in general across all disciplines. Swimming comes a bit naturally to me, so I don't spend a ton of time stressing over that one, and maybe why it's one of my stronger ones. Biking, definitely every year. I've kind of been going up 10 to 15 watts per year in terms of like ability when it comes to racing. I won't even say FTP, but my ability to hold for, 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. 2 hours, 14 minutes. It's kind of, I think my fastest is like 212, 213. And then running, like, yes, I have actually seen really big improvements in actually swimming and running now that I'm thinking about it. In the past, when I was coached by Nick, we spent a week together. Nicholas Chase from RTS, the CEO dude. He's also a professional. He coached me for 9 months, and the most value I got out of all that actually was once we spent a week together, and he really gave me some feedback on my running form, in terms of like how I lean forward and where my foot strike is. And I've heard this stuff come to me by numbers of different people in the past saying like, I should lean forward a little bit more and not run behind myself. And since changing my running form, I can run quite a bit faster with less effort. So just being more efficient. And I think the same thing in the water when it comes to head roll, having the chest out a little bit, not kicking my legs kind of like this. If you can see it like these side to side, like a little less rotation, a little bit more like this, and, kicking from the hip. That's really helped change my swim game. Like my threshold now for swimming 1,000 yards, now I can swim probably, I would say like a 115, 116 per 100. And stay, I mean, that's going to be painful, but it's definitely doable. So yeah, I have seen that. Have you gotten enough interest in contacts to make Walmart Triathlon a reality in 2025? Yes. So Nick and I are going to be sitting down and planning some of that after Cozumel when he races, and try to make that happen for next year. Have the contacts, don't have the funding. So if you're interested in helping fund that or be a part of that, and you have some ideas to make that happen, hit me up. Controversial question. I love these. What's your take on sport influencers? Technically, they are taking away marketing money from professional athletes. Should be space for both on marketing and budgets, or should brands go back and focus on performance results only instead of a number of followers? I don't know if I have a real formulated opinion on this. I think that's just the world that we find ourselves in, and it'll continue to shift. At the end of the day, one thing that's always been the same, probably ever since somebody's been selling a product and there have been sports, is that the influencers or the celebrities hold the most influence, and they help sell product. So like, that's the unfortunate reality, is just how business works and how humans work. It's like, I think the number one decision maker for when someone's buying a product is someone that they know, saying that like, hey, yeah, like, hey, where did you go get your car fixed? Or where did you get this? That referral is huge. And so influencers are really similar in that you feel like you can build a relationship with them after following them a while. And then when they say, hey, go buy this because I really like it, that's where conversions happen. So I don't have a super big take on sport influencers. Are they taking money from professionals? I don't know, I guess. But, at the end of the day, I think as triathlon grows, we'll have to worry less about that. But it'll be more like you're looking at Formula One drivers, where they have media teams working around them, posting for them. And, it's kind of like this hybrid approach. So yeah, that's as far as I'm going to that one, I think. What is your dream job? I don't really have a dream job. I've gotten to know people at Form. I've gotten to know people at Varlo and Win, and Precision Fuel and Hydration. Got to know a number of different people from the feed. And so I think my dream job, I'm going to really try to answer this question, would be if I had to have a job, would just be doing consulting strictly for those types of businesses within endurance sports or any sports, because process is what I really like, and it's what I do now, with the real estate stuff and with some of the other contracts that I've had, is just helping people understand process and how to build through growth, like how to build teams, how to build basic policies. I'm not talking about building a bureaucratic manual on how to lock everything up in red tape. I'm talking about just like simple processes that are documented and easily transferable between new people and employees to understand how to move forward. I really love process and entrepreneurship. So I think something in that area, because I've realized that my skills, I can start businesses, and I've done that a few times. One of them has been like a quasi success, but where I think I really shine is in the number 2 spot, where I come in and work with an owner and help them with operations. And I've had a number of successes now with coming into a business that needs to be turned around or needs to grow. And once they have kind of like the foundation for an ability to make money, I can hyper exponentiate that over time by just instilling good practice process, if that makes sense. Can get into that another time if you guys want to ask some questions on like the live with me and Mark or something. Does your wife partner listen to your pod, and does she give you any feedback prior or after being published? Oh, yes. So my wife has listened probably to the first 30 or so episodes since we've moved. She was on a kick of listening to like a couple a week, as some of you might do. But she's given me, lots of feedback. I think the first big thing of feedback she gave me was to keep my hands off my face. And you guys probably see that I still have a hard time doing that. Picking my nose or scratching my lip or eye or, touching my face or doing this or whatever. She's helped me become more professional in that way. And I think she's given me some feedback about just how I deal verbally with people as well. And I do take that feedback into consideration. So yes, she has. Have you ever received a no answer to join your pod for a specific reason and they didn't want to participate? So Chelsea Sodaro, I have messaged a few times. I really wanted her on, I think it was like a year ago. And she was going into world championships, and she said that it was just too busy for her at that point. So that was understood. I need to probably reach out to her again and try to have her on. Maybe I have enough clout that she would join now. But that's tough too, because I could tell that she's very stressed. And this is maybe a little assuming, so I could be wrong, and I'd be happy to be wrong. But I gathered that she was under a lot of pressure after being a mom who came back in the sport, won the world championship, and then come back again and didn't perform as well. Like I know she's felt a lot of pressure to do well, and with new sponsors, and now that people are making 6 figures off these bike deals and getting 6-figure bonuses if you win Kona or whatever. I know there's a lot of pressure there. So if you got to cut out, little old me who's got this little podcast to ask you questions about your upbringing, I can totally understand why that she said no. And I have had a few others. Sorry, I keep coughing here. Another one was Jordan Blanco. She is manager for a number of athletes. Super nice lady as well. That she's turned me down a number of times for Taylor Spivey. I think partly because, I messaged Taylor and Taylor said that she'd be happy to be on, but to reach out to Jordan. And then I think Taylor's just gone through a lot the past several years. And so it's been tough to nail her down. So, whenever someone gives me their manager's name and contact, that's usually no. Same with the manager for Yuri and a few others. So I think that'll change with time, but that's just where we are. Can you guys tell I'm losing my voice right now? So I just want to apologize for that, but I'm going to keep rolling and trucking through. Name 3 people dead or alive that you would like to have on the pod. Ooh, man, that's a good question. I think one of them would be JFK, because I know that, with situations like with the Gulf of Tonkin or, I don't know, these other false flag operations and things that he vetoed to incite the is incite the right word? That's so political. Um, there's false flag operations that our government has planned so that we could do a strike on someone else, saying that oh, they shut down our plane, we're going to shoot down their whatever. I want to talk to people who say no to those types of things, because I think it takes a lot of guts, and I think that one of the reasons why he was ousted or assassinated was probably because of not playing games with the establishment. So he would be one, dead or alive. Another person, I would really like to interview Joe Rogan, because I want to know his upbringing. And I know when you get to a certain level of fame, you try to keep that a portion of your life pretty secret, because when you get to that level of fame, you lose a lot of anonymity. So he doesn't really ever talk about his family. Like, no one could tell us his kid's name probably, other than like people that have been on his show. And so I think he would be really interesting to get to dive into. One other person. Oh, I got a good one. I would interview my dad. He's obviously dead. You said dead or alive. I would interview my dad. I think that would be such an amazing opportunity to get to know him more now, because he was 39 when he passed, and I'm 32 now. And I realized, like, wow, 39 is young. There's lots of Ironman World Championships that are 39. You got Patrick Longo, who I think is 41, and he just won a world championship. So yeah, I would really like to interview my dad. I'm gonna do a quick shout out. Somebody said, when will you visit here to the Philippines again, brother? Shout out to me. It's Jericho Arzaga. Miss you, brother. So Ian, as we call him, or Jericho, he was a younger kid. I forget how old he was. He's probably like 10 to 12 when I was in the Philippines back as a student missionary. He's just a good guy. So yeah, I don't know when I'm going to visit the Philippines again. Hopefully here before too terribly long. I hope to go to China back in the next year, so that's not too terribly far away. Maybe I'll stop by on the way back, man. So next question: if your story in endurance sports was to progress and end exactly how you would dream it would be, what would that story arc look like? Man, I just want to do this till I die. I've decided that it's a lifestyle for me, and I love doing hard things. Endurance sport it's taught me so much. I think of this, lesson that I've learned about in the beginning when I started biking. It felt so hard to do just little efforts, and sometimes even just longer rides. It was so difficult. But then, I did it over time, and then I would go and ride those same routes around my old house in Tennessee, and I would be going much faster, higher power output, even harder conditions, more windy, but I was pushing even faster and felt less pain. And I think that gave me a lot of perspective on life, and that, it's very simple lesson learned, just like resistance training with weights. The more we subject ourselves to these harsh environments or pressured environments, however you want to look at it, that force us to work hard, the next time we come around that cycle, it'll be a little bit easier. And it's been the same way with losing my dad. Like every year, like I'll have like these seasons of, I don't want to call them depression. I've only been depressed like maybe like once or twice, but like these times of sadness or just like mental jumbledness, every time we go through them, we become a little stronger for them. And that can be applied to marriage. That can be applied to Ironman. It can be applied to anything. So I did answer the question, who is Seth? I had that written there twice, but I think you guys are getting a good understanding of who I am. So why are you in Reading now? Things you're most excited about doing in that area. So we're in Reading now because, like I said, my wife has taken a fellowship to be a nurse practitioner here in the area with Shasta Community Health, and looking forward to that. What am I most excited about? Man, we've been, or woman, whoever asked this question, we have been going and hiking and doing a lot of mountain biking. My wife has done like 3 or 4 hours of mountain biking this past week, and which is a lot for her, because I usually bike, close to 9 or 10 myself. So she's climbing up to that. But anyway, we've gotten to climb up the Black Butte near Mount Shasta. That was gorgeous. There was like 6 inches of snow at the top. If you want to see pictures of that, feel free to message me. I'm happy to send you some. It was just amazing. We've went over to Mount Lassen Volcanic National Park, hot springs and lakes, and we went to this place called Paradise Meadow. It's gorgeous. Looking forward to seeing all those things and continue to explore. There's just so much to do outdoors. And then obviously biking routes. I've had some amazing ones so far. And I'm about to go on a 4.5 hour ride after this. It's now 9 a.m. on November 10th. So Probably should wrap it up before too long, but yeah, I'm excited about just being outside. Swim, bike, run. Which do you enjoy the most? I think I enjoy biking the most, just in terms of the freedom it affords, because you can jump on a bike and literally go anywhere. And it's just amazing, when you can ride 60, 70, 80, 100, 110 miles, the amount of things you can see all under the power of your own legs. Like, that's a pretty amazing thing. I do enjoy swimming. Even though it has been a struggle lately as I've been trying to ramp up the volume, getting ready for Worlds. And it's been a little colder out. Luckily, we have a heated pool here in Reading. But yeah, and I also enjoy running. So I like them all. I think biking probably the most, run second, swim last. That's probably what most people would say anyway. Favorite activity outside of endurance training? Oh man, good question. Definitely playing music. So you see I have my guitar back here. I'm going to be getting a piano here in our house. And I just got some... I forget what the cord is called that plugs into the XLR cords that plug into my mic and then plug into my interface for guitar and stuff. I like making music. I'm not super good at it yet, but I do love playing music. It's a great outlet for playing on the piano. And over the years, I have really learned to enjoy that because emotionally it has helped me just unpack a lot of things that are going on upstairs. Next question. When will you go for our KOMs? This is from Dave Haddix. Thanks, Dave, for submitting this question. I am not a huge KOM person. If I'm there and I'm in the middle of an effort and I realize let's drop a live segments on and I'm close to this, I might go for it. But it's never been a huge thing for me to try to snipe segments. If they're really long, I'll get them. Like there was this one I did at the Cherry Hollow Skyway. I didn't realize I was going for it. I think I got like second or third fastest time, but it was this like 100-mile or 85-mile loop with 12,000 feet of vertical that I got pretty close on that I'd like to go and get again. But as far as like the smaller ones, I'm not as interested because I know I could probably get a lot of them, but it doesn't take a lot of skill or endurance or effort, I think, to go and like snipe a minute and a half KOM typically. So I take that back. I'm going to get chastised for this. The climbing ones I really do enjoy. The ones that are like sprints and stuff, I also doesn't suit me. And I have a 2T bike that I usually ride on too. So I don't know. I don't usually go for KOMs. I guess that's the easiest way to answer that question. Most valuable training advice you can suggest or impart on someone you don't know. Just be consistent. That's all it comes down to. When I first started training, I wrote my first little training plan. It was by time. 45 minutes on a bike a day and, running and swimming and measuring swimming by yardage and measuring running in time or miles, always measuring the bike in minutes. I think just keeping those core principles and trying to build up a little bit over 3 to 4 weeks in terms of volume and time on each of the sports and then backing off, on that recovery week and truly backing off like 30, 40%, maybe even sometimes 50%. Is what affords the most growth. That's my opinion, what I've experienced personally. So biggest limiter in life and in sport. I'd say the biggest limitation in life is myself. I'm a pretty driven individual, so I don't feel like I have many limitations. Even though I don't have a ton of cash, like I can always find that and fundraise it if I needed to. So I don't know. I think it's me, probably mental. Yeah, we'll say that. Because in sport, like my biggest drawback or biggest pullback is, in performance-wise, is always mentally myself. So I think that hopefully answers that question a little bit. Probably should think a little bit deeper about that one. Biggest gift in life and sport. Oh, the biggest gift for me, that's a good question too. I think for me, one of the biggest gifts in life is my wife, because in the very beginning, and I think it's like this with most all people, you are attracted to the physical side of someone. And that's what attracted me to her the first time. However, when I saw her the first time, this is going to sound a little kooky for some people, I could tell that she was a pretty deeply spiritual person. And I deeply craved that because beauty is fleeting. And after a while, my wife and I both were going to be just old saggy bag of bones, skin and bones here. And the things that are going to keep that spark alive, I think, are our mental ability to talk about things that matter, spiritual things, life and love, happiness, sadness, like being able to unpack those emotions together in a verbal way that is fulfilling, is what truly matters. And my wife and I can have very deep conversations, and she knows how to see me when I'm at a low spot like no one else has ever seen me before. And I think it's her ability to have empathy. So she has been my greatest gift in so many ways, in that way, and also in sport, because she is so supportive in ways that, honestly, like, I am not as supportive as she is, and I'm trying to be that, but she is so selfless and giving in life and in sport. So I think that honestly, she is my biggest gift here on this earth. The other biggest gift I would say is how I view God. And that was given to me by a lot of really good people in my life, who I've chosen to obviously believe and listen to. Um, but their perspective, I think I say, yeah, the biggest gift in life and sport, I would say it actually might be perspective of others. Because if I'm a Christian, I truly believe we're all part of the body of Christ, and the arm can't do something without the eyes, and the mouth can't do something without the ears. Having these different perspectives, that people all make up the body of who we are as humans, like a collective whole. Some people call collective consciousness or whatever, all those buzzwords. That is a gift. So finally, I'm going to leave you guys with a piece of advice. I'm asking myself this question, so maybe it's self-serving. We'll see. What would you tell someone who wants to start a podcast? I wrote down this question because podcasts are very popular. They are influential. They are an important part of the media landscape now, especially given what's just happened with the 2024 election campaign. No matter who you are, you're on the Harris side or you're on the Trump side, no matter which side you're on, there's no doubting that podcasts served a very important role in the dissemination of information, dialogue, and discourse. So it is a very important time to have dialogue. Don't start a podcast just to start a podcast. If you have a passion for something, start a podcast around that, and don't watch the numbers. The numbers do not matter. Honestly, if I was to stop this episode right here, end at 100, and never do another episode, we haven't reached that many people. But the messages that I've got from people and them telling me how it's impacted their life, even if I was only to help impact through some of the conversation that I helped facilitate one person, it would have been worth it. Because again, perspective is what truly matters. So if you want to go start a podcast, do it. All right. Well, this has been an hour and 8 minutes of me talking to myself. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope that it brought a little perspective and context for who I am. I know I rambled quite a bit. So maybe the next time I'll be a little bit more thorough with how I structure it. But I thought for this first time doing it and hitting the milestone of 100, thought it would probably be good to go off the cuff, because that's how I ask most of my questions. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. No matter where you're doing that, no matter where you're watching or listening, if you could, for me, like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, all of those things, as I say every single episode, do help grow this. And while I don't care about the numbers, I do want it to continue to grow. I don't want to change how I have my conversations with people. I do want to learn how to talk a little slower. But yeah, all of those things will continue to help push this forward. And if you like this, this style, let me know. And if there's something you want to see out of the podcast in the future, let me know as well. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Truly, from the bottom of my heart. In the different things that I've started, and the different businesses, the different whatevers, now this podcast, there's always this moment when you reach this certain level of growth where people start to take notice and really latch on to the brand. And, I'm thinking of different people: Colleen, Marco, this girl who just messaged me, Kathleen, forget his name, Claudian, another guy who can't pronounce his name with K. Anyway, all of you guys out there is what I'm trying to say, who are becoming part of this like small knit group of investing into this podcast because you see something there that really means a ton to me. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for listening, and for investing yourself into my story and the story of others. So I will end it there. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will catch you in the next one on Thursday.